You know, I'm just gonna get him to move over here.
I'll come over here.
We can stand, well, we'll move this basket, if you wanna move that, if you wanna move that over here, I just wanna move the basket out of the way. That way all of us can see you at the same time.
That'll work. How is everybody?
Good.
Yeah, we doing well. Thank y'all for letting me come and speak to you guys. So just like he said, we're gonna show some of the activities that we've had since August of last year. We've had some pretty good successes. That work? It's on. There we go. Okay, so here are some of the, matter of fact, one particular council member will know about this one. You can see all the trash there. Does it? There we go. You can see the boat, the camper here, had a lot of trash right here. This is what it looks like afterwards. This is another one, also Courtney Hodges. This one we've been fighting with probably since later part of 2017 to get this vehicle moved, and there's actually two more back here in the back, and as you can tell, they're gone.
Question, please.
Sure.
Why did it take so long?
Why did it take so long?
You said 2 years, didn't you?
It was the end of 17 that this case was first opened. She's an elderly lady, and then when I got the case, I just worked with her and got a hold of one of her family members, and then that family member was able to help me get those vehicles removed. She wasn't in, really, to be honest with you, she wasn't in a position to move them, and she didn't have the financial means to move them. I just got with a family member, which was her older son, I believe lived in Macon, and he come down and helped me get rid of them. Oh, wrong way. This is right here, y'all saw the overflow lot there at Jeff Smith. It was sitting here for about 45 days. We had a company just come and drop the other half of this double wide and just leave it there. It had burn damage, and we were able to finally track down the owner out of South Georgia and made him come back up here and get it. And as you can see, it's completely moved, and they got their parking lot back. That one took a little bit of time to track the guy down and just decided to leave it there. This is a case that we're currently working on. As you can tell, these are some of the worst. This particular house probably has 6 or 7 derelict vehicles, fence completely out of compliance, and we put our violation notice here. This particular individual working through the court system now, hopefully to get this cleaned up. Just wanted to show you some of what we're actually working on and what's going on in your city, and this one's, you know, a pretty bad one. Next one is some of the signs and things that we have to deal with. Illegal banners, these signs right here, and all this has been completely cleaned up and like it's supposed to be. This is another before and after. This is what it looked like before I contacted the family. This is another heirs property where you've got about 5 to 7 heirs living all over the country. House has never been probated out, but I was able to find a brother that was connected with this family. He come over here and took care of everything and cleaned it up, and it looks pretty good today too. We're still working on the house and getting it through the court system to try to get the house itself into compliance, and that's going to take us a little bit of time because we've got to get this, all the heirs to get in agreements and get it through probate court. So that slows me down quite a bit. This is another before and after picture of that same house. It looks a lot better. This is another in-town house. This one had 2 derelict vehicles, just junk everywhere. That vehicle there wasn't running. This vehicle wasn't running. We got numerous citizen complaints on it, and we were able to get it also cleaned up. This is what it looks like today right here. None of that stuff is there. It actually looks a lot better. They've done even some more work. This is another actual piece of city property right here. We're on Wisdom Street. I think we removed 22 buggies or shopping carts from this piece of property. And this is what it looks like today. City Public Works went over and helped me with this. And actually, they planted grass, and it's all nice and green now, and all those buggies have been removed from the property. This is another one I got a citizen complaint on. This is what it looks like here, and this is what it looks like today, and it still looks pretty good now. Of course, our signs have been removed. He did a lot of work right here, clearing from one street to the other. That goes all the way to the next street. This is where I want to show you that we don't only deal with residential area. This is behind a particular restaurant in our city, and this is what all this right here was getting into the stormwater, and that's a picture of the grease on top of it. This is what the back of their dumpster area was looking like, and today it's looking a lot better. This particular one the health department had to assist us in. But we don't only deal with houses and things of that nature. So since August, we've had 283 code compliance cases. About 70% of them have been resolved. As far as signs and things go, we've removed 110 since then, various signs through the city. And then before I read that last sentence, I want to just take a quick minute and recognize a few folks. But last year we had our fall cleanup, and that was pretty successful. We removed a lot of tonnage from that one particular house there on Parkway. Quite a bit of tonnage from there. Lieutenant Ammons with the PD was the one that helped us with there, and he did a great job. He interacted with the community, and I really appreciate that. The fire department is always willing to help. I think they, with their fire prevention initiative, installed 4 smoke detectors in that neighborhood that we used last year. Chief Paul's always willing to help. And then some of the things that you saw, like on Wisdom Street, I couldn't do those without Todd Ennis, Ansley, Mr. Smith. They help take care of those when I find those issues, and they're always willing to stop what they're doing and give us a hand. Ladies in customer service are always willing to help. Ms. Palmer helps me with getting that word out and notifying anybody in the community when we have something going on. Mr. Gilmore's always supportive. City Attorney's Office is always in the middle helping us. And I pointed all those people out just to say we can't do that without them. It's a community effort, and as we work together, then we have those success stories. And I just wanted to point out to you that it's more than just making people mow their yards. So I'll be more than happy to accept any questions that you may have.
What questions do you have?
I just want to thank you for doing a good job.
I appreciate it. I can't do it. I appreciate y'all's support.
We thank you very much. I know we work with you on our cleanups through our housing team. You've done an outstanding job helping us with that. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to your continued success.
I appreciate it. We got another one coming up May 4th.
We'll be there.
All right. Thank y'all.
Item 3A2 is to consider options dealing with boarded up buildings. Mr. Wood?
Yes, sir. Thank you. So I provided a memo I think you have in your packet, but one of the things that I've noticed is a lot of neighborhoods have boarded up homes, boarded up buildings. I think it applies to commercial areas as well. And I think part of the concern that I see is that with a concentration of boarded up buildings, there tends to be a perception that the neighborhood is not worth investing in, and that shouldn't be the case. And I think one of the concerns that I have is that property owners seem to think that if they board up their building, that's all they have to do with it. And over time, it becomes an eyesore, becomes an issue in the neighborhood, and how that neighborhood feels about itself and how investors may feel about putting money into that neighborhood. So I've suggested that maybe we should consider looking at some type of time limit on how long a house can be boarded up or a building can be boarded up. And I'm not sure what that is, what that particular time frame is, whether it's 6 months, a year, maybe longer. But I think that addressing this issue will help improve our community by showing that someone cares about the neighborhood. So, trying to remember what else was in the memo, but essentially just wanted to kind of raise that for your consideration. I think, well, the other thing was, my thought is, with putting a time limit on the how long a building can be boarded up, we give the property owner some options. One is that they can bring the property into compliance from a housing code, building code standpoint, property maintenance standpoint within that time period, or they demolish the property, or they donate it to some organization that's willing to accept it and do what's needed to make that a useful property again, whether that be the land bank or some other organization. So I think there are some options to look at to address this, but being able to board up a building and just leave it that way forever, I think is not an option that we should consider. So just wanted to raise that for you.
So what's your recommendation tonight?
My recommendation is that we do move forward with adopting an ordinance, preparing an ordinance for your consideration to place some time limit on how long a building can be boarded. As I mentioned in the memo, I'm not sure that we necessarily would create a new boarding permit, but essentially whatever that time frame is would start for any new building that's boarded, or from the time that it's boarded. With the existing buildings, there are quite a few around, so it will take us some time to work our way through, and that time frame would start when we actually notify those property owners.
Is there any legal, timeframes that we have to abide by that's written in state law or anything like that?
I'm not aware of any. I can certainly check that. But I think going back and looking, I know in my previous employer had a time frame of 6 months. And I just went back today to kind of look at how they had that in their ordinance. And they actually modified the International Property Maintenance Code. And in talking with Mr. Hester today, he said that can be done as long as you are going above and beyond what the minimum requirements are in the code. So currently there are provisions that allow buildings that are hazardous and nuisances to be closed. That's the terminology that they use. With my previous employer, they kind of modified that and went and talked about boarded up buildings. And in that case, Tracy also mentioned today that he's asked Danny to actually contact Albany to look at. They have some standards on how to actually board up a building, what the proper way is, proper types of materials and so forth. So I think we can also kind of look at that. So my recommendation is that you give us the go ahead to prepare an ordinance to bring back to you.
Mr. Gilmore, any addition to that? Your thoughts?
As far as I'm concerned, it's imperative.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you go around, you take a look at these buildings, and Brian's absolutely right. You get 1, 2 of them over there, and it just sets a tone for the whole neighborhood. And it may be our initial basis with it, but a number of them, after a while, really are abandoned or close to it. Because we get into issues about and overgrowth, in the yard, and all that type of stuff. It's just an ongoing problem. And you don't have to look not only in Perry, but you look around a lot of other places. I don't want to pick on them, but Macon, for example, has got a huge problem with that type of stuff. And if we don't continue to be proactive, it can be a problem for us where we start to lose neighborhoods, and we definitely don't want to do that.
I think we're holding it for 6 months.
My initial thinking is I'd like to take a look at that or see what comes. I think 6 months itself is a little too short of a time frame.
If they're going to do it, they're going to do it.
Well, they may have to raise funds to do that. Maybe.
Right. They're well, for example, you could, and not that it would go on and on and on, but remember Mr. Hicks was just talking about heirs and all that type of stuff. You see, you can have some type of problems, potentially there. Now, I don't think it should ever be a deal, at least as far as we're concerned, if you approve with this, that you can have a deal about where a family can't work it out to go through probate or whatever, and the property just sits there and continues. You see what I mean? But I don't think, I think we run into legal problems and everything with a 6-month time frame. Now, if we talked about, for example, a year's time, then I think we're probably okay on something like that. And most of the places that I can think of where we have problems, they've been that way for a year plus.
Oh, many years.
Yeah.
You know, not cutting you off, my thing was that, like you said, most times with a family, the have property, and the family member not here, and my question is to you, Ms. Wood, well, how did it get started? You know what I mean? What was the purpose of people nailing up buildings? Did that did it come from the city? Did it come from the state? You know what I mean? Because like you said, it's like everywhere you go, when somebody move out of the building, next thing you know, they're
Right.
and causing that theft, you know what I mean? People robbing, breaking in, taking stuff, you know what I mean? And so most people start nailing it up to keep people from going into that. But that's a good point, like you said. Well, I don't know what Georgia got in the laws or not or whatever, but I think that's good. What about what Mr. Gilmore said? I think a year, let it go longer than 6 months, because if they're their property, we gotta find out where the people's at, and like there was the legality of it, we gotta be able to figure it out, because we don't need nothing to come back on the city that we don't need as somebody wants to sue the city for doing something that we want to enhance the city, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think a year is probably reasonable here. Just, I mean, in my time here, things move a little bit slower in the development process than they do in places I've been in the past. Plus, I think, you know, and maybe we can look at within that year, if there are extenuating circumstances, here's property and having to go through probate or whatever, that there can be some exceptions or extensions of that time period. So we'll certainly take a look at that and also check the state law.
But if you give them a year, they're gonna wait 6 or 8 months before they're gonna start doing anything. So we give them 6 months, they don't have a whole lot of time to think about it. Maybe just get something going.
I understand. But they're going to be notified up front that, you know, that 1 year is it. And unless they are showing us that they're working toward it, then we'll move it along a little quicker and get them before Judge Freeman or whoever we need to kind of, you know, get a fire with it under.
If you're gonna do it a year, then a year's deadline, it's got to be done before
Correct.
that year, so
Correct.
not starting to do
That's
that.
correct. Yes, sir.
We just want to make sure we don't get too close where their attorney, the family thing, starts talking about us taking some type of deal like that. We want to stay away from that.
Any other questions that you might have? Do you have concurrence to move forward for them to put together paperwork that's necessary to get this moving?
Yes.
Fine, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Item 3B is Economic Development Department. 3B1 is consider options of the old City Hall and Alcon building. Ms. Harden?
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Walker and Council. These are two properties that are owned by the city. The Alcon building is located off Kelwood Drive. I'm not sure if it's being utilized or not. There was no cars there or anything when I drove by today. I know that the PBO building is what's currently being operated out of City Hall, the former City Hall. And I do know that that organization does great work in the city and that you're heavily involved with that, Mr. Hunt. So I do want to be sensitive to that discussion as we discuss the future of these properties and what Mayor and Council would like to do with those. I don't know if PBO is using the whole building. And I know that with the recent passing of Frank Shelton, that we just wanted to discuss these properties and what your future plans are for them, and if they would ever be available for the private sector, and if so, when.
I could get those answers for you tomorrow.
Okay.
Write them down what they were, please. As far as I know, it's going to continue under Mr. Larry Wood would be the head man. But I can find out the answers to every question you ask.
Okay, great. I'll send you an email.
Mayor Council, this is a longer-term strategy. This is not tomorrow or 6 months, but originally what brought this up, I asked Ms. Hard to bring this to you, is she already has been approached, I think this is correct, isn't it, Ashley? Been approached by private sector folks interested in purchasing that building. And she said, well, it's currently, under use and everything. Well, okay, what's their plan, that type of stuff. So that's why because you may remember we had some discussion on this before when we talked about the quality of the building. So I don't want it at all perceived that we are interested in having PVO vacate or any of that type of stuff. But I think it is realistic for both these buildings where you all longer term be thinking, do we want to retain them in public ownership, or do we want to take some other type of avenue? For example, on the old City Hall, one of the things would be that is possibly that you may say, well, should that time come that the current tenant has no interest in that property, then you may want to turn that over, see what I mean, and have it declared surplus and out on the market and see what happens. Or you may say, well, we're going to continue Jernigan down that right-of-way street and make the connection to Andrews Heights. Remember, we had touched on that, before. Or you may want to say, no, we want to retain that building underneath public ownership and do something with it. I don't know what it is, okay? And other than, as far as I know, no street possibly going through. But the Alcon building is another one, that's been kind of dragged on there, and councils in the past have talked about, whether there's a future ongoing public need for that structure or not. So what we're asking you all to do is just think about that. Certainly no answer today or anything like that, but think about longer term, what would you like to do? Because I can tell you from at least the city manager's perspective, both those sites do not fit into anything the city's going to be doing or where we're going. They do not, so there's no longer term interest as far as I can determine on why the city would want to retain that ownership there. So, but you all may have some different ideas on that type of stuff. You may be aware of some other groups that might be interested in coming back in, whatever the case may be.
As our footprint of our downtown continues to expand, and we're all experiencing the fact that there's very limited places for retail to go in down there, I could see that being consolidated and that being filled out by someone in the future as a possible development over there. So I think there's, I don't know that we have a city has a need for that whatsoever, given the plans we've got in the 700 block. So I guess the request is for us just to give thought to it, look at it somewhere in the future as to what we'd like to do with it, and come back with any kind of information we may have.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
What questions do you have, Ms. Harden?
Ashley, has anyone approached you about the Alcon building?
Nobody has approached me about that one. That one Mr. Gilmore made me aware of, but I did drive by it today. I'm like, wow, that's a really good spot for a restaurant. Of course, there's no access on Larry Laughlin Parkway. I didn't know how easy it would be to get a cut in there, but it's a good location.
No, I don't remember.
And if it was available.
We've been through that before. DOT's not going to
That
allow
would never
that to
happen, okay. It's still a good location right across from the fairground, so I'm sure that if you guys surplused it, that it would be on the radar and there might be some interest.
Thank you, and we'll get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Item 3C is the Office of the City Manager. 3C1 is consider amending the city comprehensive plan, housing relative to location of Georgia Department of Community Affairs tax credit housing projects. Mr. Gilmore.
Thank you. I'm sure as we have this discussion, there are going to be some people in the community who say we are a day late and dollar short about talking about this. But went back and had Brian do some research and everything, and certainly it's not that the city is opposed to multifamily housing or even tax credit. However, for a number of reasons, there seems to be a complete concentration of these developments in one section of the city. And we're not getting, for a number of reasons, but they're not coming into other areas that would actually probably be more beneficial for this type of housing option for the residents who are generally there, or potentially new properties that would not have that much of a perceived conflict. So if the council has no objections, what I would suggest is we put something together for you to take a look at. And you may remember this goes back to the comprehensive plan as one of the special exception deals. Now, excuse me, I want to emphasize that even if we do this, this does not negate that projects won't come in, because you all as a council don't have control to say yes or no on those type of developments anymore. But you can have it stated in your comprehensive plan that your preference is that they, everybody with me, that they go in some other sections or areas of the city. And we'll take a look at some other items to make sure we don't have any legal issues with it, but just as a policy for you to establish.
What questions do you have? As you all know, the housing team spent probably 2 years, Mr. Smith, didn't we, working with Prestwick?
That's correct.
To place this type of housing in an area that we felt very strongly needed, only to be, you know, have somebody come in on top of us. And of course, you can only have one approval per every 2 years, I think it is, that you can get approval for those. So I think if we can put it into comprehensive plan and say this is where we would recommend, then as Mr. Gilmore says, we do not have the authority anymore to say no, you know, we do not want those and we don't want them at that specific location. But maybe this will give some guidance to some of the developers as where we would like to see the focus in the future.
You know, somebody might like to have it too.
Do you have any other thoughts, any concerns? Do we have consensus to move forward with putting that together?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Item 4 is council member items. Mr. King?
I have none.
Ms. Brown Gray? Mr. Gunn?
Sorry, early head shake, no.
Okay. Mr. Jackson?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hunt?
No, sir.
Mr. Gilmore?
Just one. I was approached by a very enthusiastic person who also provided some petition information, which I'll be happy to provide to you, indicating that she felt it would be very beneficial for the city and a great economic development project for the city to construct an indoor year-round ice skating rink. I was very pleasant with this person, who is a resident of the city. I said that I would bring that to you. It would be my recommendation to you that while this is probably a very worthwhile project, that generally this is something that's done in the private sector, not on the public sector. And at least at this time, the city's not in a position to financially or operationally proceed with that.
Good answer.
We in
I
agreement.
think we agree.
Yeah.
We're good. Anything else? That's it, huh? An ice skating rink. Mr. Smith, anything from the city manager?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem. Mayor Pro Tem and Council, just a couple things to share with y'all. Over the past couple of weeks, we've had a couple of excellent opportunities to get out into the community and work with some community organizations and kind of educating them about what Public Works, City of Perry, that type of thing does. The first was a couple of Fridays ago. We had a number of our Public Works folks participate in Transportation Day at Lake Joy Primary. We were requested to come out there, bring some of our equipment, so they bought, of course, a big tractor, the knuckle boom truck, and the street sweeper. And the kids just, ate that up. Obviously, you might have seen the photos on Facebook. The Board of Education has since gotten back with us and said that, our folks and our equipment and stuff really made the day and just kind of stole the show. And, all the folks in Public Works that went out there said they had a blast working with the kids, and, just a really, really good deal. And then this past week, Ms. Fitzner, our landscape manager, who you all know, was requested to come speak at the local garden club. And she said it was a very enthusiastic group. They had a lot of questions for her. But she said, it was, again, an excellent opportunity to get out there and provide some services and things that we don't typically provide to our citizens and to our organizations here in the community. So it's both fantastic. You should be very proud of your employees that participated in that. And then finally, Monday is the beginning of Public Works Cleanup Week. And as you are all aware, this is basically when you can dump anything you want to get out of your house by the side of the road, and we'll come pick it up. So we encourage citizens to participate in that. We'll have our public works staff, sanitation crew on full duty. They'll be working long hours, picking all that stuff up. Lots of trips to the landfill, but it's always a very successful event. I think there's been a lot of activity on social media around it, so we're anticipating another successful one this spring. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Newby, anything from the city attorney?
Yes, sir.
Nothing else? Thank you. Item 5 is department head items. Ms. King, anything this evening?
Nothing, sir.
Mr. Ward, anything?
Nothing tonight, sir.
Ms. Harden, anything additional?
Our mayor and council, our Food Truck Friday rally is this Friday from 6 to 10. We'll have 16 food trucks, live music. Our new special events coordinator, you guys will be meeting tomorrow night. Ellen and I will be out there parking trucks and working the event and kids activities. So following this event, the Food Truck Fridays will be the second Friday of every month. But with Dogwood Festival, the second weekend of April, our rally is this Friday. So I hope to see you guys out there.
Thank you. We'll plan to be there. Major Phillips,
Nothing, sir.
you had a busy weekend, didn't you?
Yes, sir. Busy.
Everything I saw on the newspaper and all social media.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Wood, anything?
Yes, sir, I do have a couple of items, Mayor Pro Tem. First, I wanted to remind you, I sent out an email last Friday asking for any streets that you're interested in potentially having cleaned up in your districts. Our spring cleanup will be May 5th. Saturday, May 5th, we'll be looking for volunteers, and we'll be culling through the streets that suggestions that we get from you. Hopefully, we'll do as many as we can, but it will depend on volunteers. So I've got a couple of lists already from a couple of council members, so just remember to get that to me as soon as you can. I think I asked you for next Wednesday. We're meeting the following Thursday with the housing team, and we'll kind of finalize that list or prioritize that list and then use that to determine which ones we do once we know the number of volunteers. The other thing I wanted to mention to you is that last Friday was the end of the quarter. We did 58 new single-family residential permits last month. That puts us at 127 for the quarter. So on that pace, if it keeps up, we're looking at a 500 permit year. So, we're going gangbusters here.
Yeah, it is.
Tracy and his people say they don't want that many.
Keeping them busy, it's obvious.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, anything from Public Works?
No, sir. Nothing further.
Ms. Palmer?
Nothing tonight, sir.
Nothing
Thank you.
tonight? Is that everyone? Regent Walker, we're delighted to have you with us this evening. You have any comments for us this
Brings
evening?
back a lot of happy memories and a few that are not so happy. Glad to be here always.
We're glad to have you. Thank
We
you.
very much appreciate our association with the City of Perry, and we appreciate the progress that City of Perry is making.
Well, they're doing a very good job for us, I can tell you. We really appreciate the hard work they put in each and every day. And we're glad that we have a new person that's going to be working with us over in municipal court. And thanks for taking care of that. We really appreciate it. One item that I have is that the Walk with the Mayor is scheduled for the 23rd of April, and it's going to be in Miss Bynum Grace's area.
She won't even be here. She'll be on vacation.
On vacation. But Mr. King will be there covering District 1. And we've had a request from the Perry Rotary Club that we do what we did last year and have it back at Rotary Centennial Park. And they would invite all Rotarians and, of course, all the citizens to join us, and I think that's a pretty good idea, because they're looking to invest in other parks here in the city, and so I think we ought to encourage them to do that, if it's okay with you, since you're not gonna be here.
I think that's a wonderful idea. I thoroughly enjoyed that walk, that last one, that ride or whatever I did.
If there's nothing else to come before us, we'll stand adjourned until tomorrow night at 5 o'clock for our free council meeting.